Hello folks, it's Charlie in Westeros here, and since it's already January 2016, this will be my final predictions video for Season 6 of Game of Thrones until the first trailer comes out. I've gotten this requested a few times already, and since I never said much of her in my past videos, today I will be addressing all potential spoilers surrounding Margaery Tyrell's character for the next season of Game of Thrones, as well as make some bold predictions based off of the available information. So, the last we saw of Marjorie, she was in the custody of the Sparrows, locked away in a cell beneath the Sept of Baelor, and she is expected to stand trial. In the books, Marjorie is eventually freed for effectively two reasons. One, she is released into the custody of Randyll Tarly, who is a bannerman to the Tyrells, because the evidence found against her is weak, and two, it is implied that the Sparrows are intimidated by Tarly and his army. Marjorie then selects a trial by judges of faith rather than a trial by combat, the outcome of which remains to be seen. So with all this information, let's take a look at what we have from Season 6 thus far. We have one photo from a slate with the 6th episode marked on it, along with photos of Jaime and Marjorie on set. Marjorie is dressed in humble attire and on the surface doesn't appear to be in bad terms with the Sparrows. The Tyrell army is also shown near the steps of the Sept of Baelor, and this has led many to believe that these leaks are of Marjorie finally being released from the Sparrows. However, it does seem to me like an awfully long time for her to be released from their custody, so I have to propose a few options here. The first is Marjorie will be released by the Sparrows earlier on in the season by acquiescing to their religious doctrine and will pretend to be pious and a zealous subject of the seven gods. I feel pretty confident saying that she is faking it since Natalie Dormer, who plays Marjorie herself, has stated in an article from Women's Health that, quote, Marjorie is a savvy chick and she's trying to find an angle. She's trying to find a way to get out of that cell, so it's pretty amusing and ingenious the route she decides to take. My expectation is that early on in the season, Olenna, along with her recently returned son from Braavos, will go to the Sept of Baelor with armed Tyrell guards and demand the release of her granddaughter and grandson. The High Sparrow, however, will emerge from the Sept and will, without any struggle, hand over the young queen, since, in his eyes, she has, quote, seen the light. And also remember, there shouldn't be any need to shame her like Cersei, considering her offense was far from as terrible as her mother-in-law's. So why would Marjorie being released early in Season 6 make her have a reappearance at the Sept of Baelor in Episode 6 of the same season? Well, her plan does work, but I suspect there are many layers to it, and in a sense, things will backfire. You see, she will have to return to the Sept of Baelor to actually stand trial, and she must also find a way to get her brother out of the cells. Seeing as Loras is the heir to Highgarden in the TV series, it stands to reason as to why there will have to be a large Tyrell army waiting outside of the Sept in the first place. There have also been talks of Tommen being seen on set the day these photos were released, and apparently emerging from within the Sept rather than enter it. In my mind, this also feeds into two options. There are already rumors and false plot leaks claiming that Tommen gives himself over to the Sparrows at some point because he wants to be imprisoned with his wife Marjorie. This would help to explain Jaime's presence in Episode 6 of Season 6, as he might be ordered by Cersei to get his son out of the Sparrows' custody, but this does also imply Marjorie would be imprisoned for over half the season. Of course, this is not necessarily an impossible option, but this means Marjorie would be locked away for something like 10 episodes if you start from the episode she was imprisoned in Season 5. If we follow this second option, then I fully expect Tommen to plead Jaime to get his wife out of the Sparrow's custody this episode. The other possibility, and this is just my own hunch, is that Tommen actually buys into Marjorie's pious behavior, assuming she is released early on. Considering there are spies all over King's Landing, it wouldn't surprise me if she were to maintain her little charade of fooling the Sparrows, and I think this would absolutely fool the young, weak-minded king as well. As such, Tommen's presence at the Sept of Baelor could mean that he either wants to be present with Marjorie at her trial, or he buys into her conversion and is himself foolishly trying to become pious just like her. Jaime and the Tyrell soldiers would be present to ensure his safety. Whatever the reason, Tommen is apparently going to be leaving with Marjorie at the Sept, and considering the Tyrell bannermen are present but are standing aside, I don't think there will be any violence or backlash during this scene. so Tommen should be able to leave with her unharmed. Now let's enter some heavier predictions/crackpot territory. Knowing that King's Landing is more or less lost to the zeal of the Sparrows and no longer trusting the Lannisters, I suspect the Tyrells will effectively withdraw from the city once Margaery and Loras are both safe, abandoning Cersei, Tommen, and Kevan. I discount Jaime as I expect him to have finally left the city to fight the remaining Tully forces in the Riverlands at this point in the season, just like in the books. Even though we are led to believe the Sparrows are above being bribed or bargained with, I think this season will lead us onto a very different path. I suspect the Tyrells will reach an arrangement with the High Sparrow to leave King's Landing and thereby leave Tommen vulnerable to the Sparrows in exchange for releasing Loras Tyrell. I say this for a few reasons, and I base it largely on events from the last season. The first is that the Sparrows have already made it clear when Tommen went to the Sept to try and release Margaery in Season 5 that they view him as a bastard and a product of incest and therefore not a legitimate king. The second is that during the High Sparrow and Olenna's conversation last season, he made himself seem above all worldly vices, but that he detests the corrupt nature of the Westerosi nobles. I suspect they will flip that trope on us this coming season, and he will, in a sense, be corrupted by the power he has achieved, which is why I don't think he will be entirely against bargaining with Olenna, especially if it allows him to be more powerful in the city itself. I think this would also legitimize his eventual demise by the hands of Frankenmountain. The third reason is from a smaller hint, but a significant one nonetheless. When Tyrion and Dany were discussing her return to Westeros last season, he began examining which of the great houses would support her claim. For some reason, he mentioned the Tyrells, even though they were aligned with the Lannisters at the time. Given that the Tyrells have already switched sides a couple of times during the series, I think it is only fitting that once the Tyrell-Lannister relationship has soured to such a terrible point, they will turn coat a third time to their original overlords, the Targaryens in the form of Daenerys, as I suspect by this point many in the Seven Kingdoms will be anticipating her arrival. I think there is something to be said also of the fact that Lady Olenna was fascinated with strong and powerful women, especially if you recall her interaction with Brienne of Tarth a couple of seasons ago, and supporting the likes of Daenerys may not seem like a bad option in her eyes. Now, whether or not this new alliance ever comes to fruition is something I expect will take place, or at least be explored in Season 7. What I do think will happen, however, is that any substantial force to guard the king, other than the small Kingsguard and some gold cloaks, and without Jaime to properly lead them, the Sparrows will attempt to seize control over the city and at least try to kill Tommen by storming the Red Keep. This is when all hell will break loose, with Cersei unleashing the revived mountain, and she will finally burn the city down to the ground. Anyway, folks, I could go on and on about this point, but to summarize my thoughts, Margaery pretends to be a sparrow, Tommen buys into it, the Tyrells, including Margaery, leave King's Landing in exchange for Loras' release, and eventually opt to support a Targaryen restoration. The Sparrows go apeshit, and King's Landing burns. I realize those thoughts are very crackpotterish, but I figure this is kind of my last chance to make some truly bold predictions for a change until we get a glimpse of the trailer for Season 6. So what do you folks think? Do you agree with my thoughts? Do you disagree? What fate do you think will await Margaery Tyrell in Season 6? I will be back with more Game of Thrones videos, but since the Shannara Chronicles television series has just started, I will also be reviewing that TV show. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all next time.